It's Platt, and today we try one of the most popular pub beers around. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. So the particular beer we have today is Newcastle Brown Ale, a name that nearly everybody knows, and again, one of the classic just pub beers around. I'm kind of surprised I hadn't gotten around to reviewing it just yet. Newcastle has a long history that dates back even before the beer was first brewed. Origins date back all the way to 1858 when the Tyne Brewing Company opened on Newcastle on the Tyne. I believe that's the city. It's called Newcastle on the Tyne. In 1890, the brewery was purchased and the name was changed to Newcastle Brewing. The history of this beer starts specifically in 1927 when it was brewed for the first time at Newcastle. A gentleman named Colonel Jim Porter, who was brewer there, had worked on the recipe for 3 years and at first thought he had screwed up. His original intent was to produce something closer to Bass Ale, but through these trials, however, kind of stumbled upon Newcastle. Let's just say things worked out for him then. The next year, in 1928, they added the Blue Star that you'll find on there. I'd seen the Blue Star for years, but never thought anything about it, but apparently there's a meaning behind it. The 5 points of the star represents the 5 founding breweries, I guess they're in Newcastle on the Tyne. The company that purchased the old Tyne Brewing in 1890, they had other breweries, so I guess this is just kind of an homage to the other breweries in their corporate chain, per se. But again, never knew what the Blue Star meant. In 1960, Scottish Brewing merged with Newcastle Brewing to form Scottish and Newcastle. If you're kind of a beer historian, you know that name. Several brands have been influenced or directly brewed or part of mergers involving them over the years. So again, definitely one of the bigger names. In the 1970s, they began exporting this to Canada and here in the U.S. Sales took off and peaked at the time. That was kind of their glory days per se. By the late 70s, going into the 80s, sales had started to slip. People's palates started to change. But luckily for them, they hit their stride again. In the late 80s and early 90s, the brand got hip again, and it was through the student unions in the UK at the universities and stuff. And I know I was going to college at the time, and the student union at North Texas where I went to, they had a little bar in the basement, and they had reasonable happy hour import prices. And that was just the coolest thing to me. I think it was like Foster's and Newcastle, and sometimes they rotate something else out. But for a broke college kid to go have an import beer while you're in college, well, I'm a sophisticated man now. You know? Look at me. Anyway, that was my first venture with Newcastle. By 1997, they had gained so much popularity, they was the most widely distributed alcoholic beverage in the entire UK. Pretty impressive rebound. Now, not to leave a good thing alone, they decided in 2000 that they were going to drop the ale name, that ales are supposedly old people's beer, even though, again, they're the most widely distributed alcoholic beverages. The marketing people decided, all right, let's drop the ale. And that lasted for about 4 years until 2004. They kind of brought it back and just left it at that. In 2008, the brand was acquired by Heineken. It was a part of a bigger sale of all of Scottish and Newcastle's brands between Heineken and Carlsberg. They kind of split the brands up, and Heineken got Newcastle. 2016, Heineken did something that normally would cause outrage, but I think this one a lot of people got over real quick. They changed the formulation. Apparently, the whole time Newcastle had been produced, they'd added some kind of coloring. There wasn't the actual color of the beer. Heineken, realizing that in a craft beer world where people are just more aware of what's in beer, they decided to drop the coloring and just added some darker malts in there to get the color. So, good job, Heineken. Lastly, the Newcastle that you drink here in the States is produced by Lagunitas. Lagunitas is also a Heineken brand, and so they do the brewing of the domestic Newcastle here. Real quick, as far as other Newcastles, here in the U.S., it's in wide distribution. It's pretty much just straight Newcastle Brown Ale, Over the years, they've tried other variations, tried to expand the line. And in the UK and Australia markets, every once in a while, they will do special releases. Here in the US, again, they've tried, at one time there was a Newcastle Amber Ale that they tried to sell as a light ale. Then there was a Newcastle Summer Ale. Heineken released in 2010, just never really gained traction. Then there was Newcastle Founders Ale. This is supposed to be a spring seasonal, what they call an ESB or extra special bitters. Again, none of these really took off, but at least we still have this one. Well, with that being said, before we try this particular beer though, let's check out the stats. So today, real quick, I thought we would review the style brown ale. This is not the most popular style out there. And I think part of it is it's a style where people are pretty traditional on it. They're not thinking outside the box. Also, too, this is not a high ABV beer that you could really, push limits on or what have you. Pretty straightforward style beer, but a style I've always liked. And again, if you're wanting to kind of get out of a generic light beer rut and want to drink something different, I don't think you can go wrong with a brown ale. Let's go over the numbers real quick. SRM, 12 to 17. We're getting darker. We're working out of like your copper amber ales. We're getting a little darker. IBUs, 15 to 25. ABV, 4 to 5.5%. This sessionable style beer. This is, again, one of those beers that you can meet your buddies at the pub and have 2 or 3 and not get wrecked. Color, amber to brown. Not dark brown, but brown. Just a nice brown. Even though it's a darker beer and a lot of people will see it and get intimidated by it, it actually has a soft body. It's not a big body beer, chewy beer, as some of my friends like to say. It pours clear. If you hold it up to the light, it pours clear. There's no haze. As far as hop goes, no real hop aroma, flavor, or bitterness. Hops are just for balance, but they aren't present, if you know what I mean. And lastly, food pairings, things like roasted pork, steak, aged Gouda, kind of heartier foods. Good brown ale with a hearty meal, maybe a nice big burger or a Reuben sandwich or something like that. Well, I'm getting hungry now. Well, with that being said, let's drink a beer. Alright, we've got a nice lighter khaki head. I can see through this, but it is a little darker than I vaguely remember. We are a very solid brown for a nose. Oh yeah, you're not getting any hops, but I am getting some of the darker malt. Not the astringent notes that you get on like a chocolate malt or coffee malt, those espresso types note, but just kind of a nice darker sugar, like more of a brown sugar kind of thing. Let's go in for a dive. Man, that's just good. I get those classic kind of darker malt notes. We're leaving kind of the bready, toasty notes, kind of getting more into maybe some caramel, some toffee, a little more richness. But again, very drinkable beer. The body's nice. I'm going to say the body's medium minus. Short finish. Again, it's not hops. You're just picking up a little bit of those kind of darker malty notes. Man, just an easy drinking beer. Has, again, if you're wanting to leave the light lager world, or you want something maybe with even a little more character than a blonde ale, this year beer, maybe blonde ales in the summer, brown ales in the winter, but just a nice beer. Again, this would go great with a cheeseburger or steak sandwich, something like that. If I just want to go to the pub and have a malty beer, this is tough to beat. This is tough to beat. I like all the craft beers, but just sometimes you just want a nice, good, malty, simple beer, and Newcastle's always fit that for me. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you'd like me to try, excuse me, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.